Hey brothers, this is Justin with Masonic Improvement. The title of this video is 5 Ways to Use Continuous Improvement in Your Masonic Lodge, or something close to that. Before I get into that though, I want to give a huge shout out to my brothers over at Fort Worth Masonic Lodge. If you haven't listened to their podcast before, it's fantastic. And they recently interviewed me and released that last week. So I'll put a link to that below if you're interested in listening to it. Also, if you haven't subscribed to me before, I put out content almost every week. So at this time, I'd like to ask you to please hit subscribe that we can keep up with me. So 5 steps to continuous improvement in a Masonic Lodge. Now, before we jump into this, I feel like we need to take a second to kind of define a few things. I talk about continuous improvement a lot in this on this channel and in my blog, and I talk about best practices also. But I guess I've never actually sat down and just kind of defined everything, or at least kind of gave you a summary of what they are. These are 2 pretty deep topics, and you could spend quite a bit of time on them. But for the purpose of what we're doing with it, I think we can get away with just looking at kind of a basic layout of continuous improvement and best practice. So basically all continuous improvement is looking at what you're doing, determining how you can improve it, and then implementing that and repeating the process. But there's actually 5 steps to this for those of us that really like things laid out. So the first step is plan. The second step is implement, and then evaluate, adjust, and repeat. 5 steps. That's all there is to it. Well, I say that's all there is to it. It's a continuous process, and there's going to be lots of hiccups, lots of setbacks. That's a normal part of the process. But let's look at each step a little bit more real quick. So the planning section is pretty straightforward. That's just where you decide what you want to do and how you want to do it. Implementation is where you actually do the plan. So let's say you're planning an event. That's when you actually run the event. Number 3 is evaluate. So generally whoever was in charge of the planning and implementation of that event would get together, they would meet, and then they would discuss what went well and what didn't. The 4th step is adjust. This is where you actually make those changes to that plan. And so basically what you'll do is you say, this didn't work, let's either scrap it or do it this way next time. Or you'll say, this worked really well, but I think we can really kick it up a notch if we do something like this also. And I want to throw this in real quick for the adjustment part, because you have a lot of people who will tell you why you can't do something, but they won't really try to make it happen. You know what I mean? So we're not really focused on why we can't do things. We're focused on what we'd like to do and how we can make it happen. Now, you won't always be able to make it happen. That's fine. But you don't want those naysayers who are just like, well, we never done that before, we can't do that, that's too much work. No. If you're really serious about trying to improve things, you're going to find a way to do it. Or at least find something as close to it as you can. That's the adjustment part. And step 5 is repeat. So at this point, you're just going to wait till it's time for that event again, and when it rolls around, you're going to plan it with those adjustments you made, implement it, evaluate what worked, what didn't, make your adjustments, and then repeat that again. And this can apply to not just events, but any kind of programs. Like, say you have like an education program that you want to run throughout the year. At the end of the year, you'll get with whoever helped you with that, what worked, what didn't. You can also do this on for degrees, and you can do like big picture with degrees, but you can also look at individual roles. So for example, you might say the master of ceremony. You could say, you did a really good job, but I think it'd really help if we learned, I don't actually know what it's called, but there's at least here in Texas, there's like a little speech that you can read to the candidate, or you can play a tape to the candidate. But you might say, I think it'd really hit home if we actually had someone in there that had memorized the speech. So let's work on either memorizing that or finding someone who knows it and using them next time we use the degree. And you can apply that to every individual little aspect of the degree as well. Now, when you have apply this process, when you get back to the planning stage, everything you're planning at that point is called best practice, or it should be best practice. Best practice is when you plan an event or a program or something like I just mentioned, and you did all this planning with the best information that you've had. that means not only is it the best information that you've had, but everything you're doing is the best that you can do with what you know. And it's not what you think you know or what you're assuming, or it's just the way we've always done it, so that's how it is. No, it's actually looking at, data, or not really, you could say it's looking at data, but we're not dealing with numbers. You're looking at evidence and making decisions based off that evidence. And that is best practice. So when we talk about this continuous improvement cycle, that's what that is. And when we talk about best practice just stems from that continuous improvement cycle. And since the continuous improvement is a cycle and it keeps repeating, your best practice is going to change over time. So what might have been best practice for your lodge 5 years ago might not be best practice now. And that could depend on a lot of things. Your community may change. Certain things about the membership of your lodge may change. And it's also worth pointing out that other lodges in like your district may have different best practices than you do. You may see a lodge where everybody wears two-piece suits, another lodge where everybody wears tuxedos, and another lodge where everybody just wears jeans and a nice polo shirt. And that is their best practice at that time. So I'm going to talk more about that in my next video, because this kind of builds up to something that I want to point out. And if you've listened to that podcast I mentioned earlier, I kind of talked about this, but I think it's worth spending a little bit more time on. So anyway, that's all I really had to say about this video. I'm trying to keep them short and sweet because I know how everybody doesn't like to listen to me ramble too much. But again, check out that podcast that I shared below. It's great stuff. I'm also going to post a kind of a transcript of what I'm saying on my blog, so give that a listen also. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.